October 10th, 2012. Dear E, it is dark and moonless tonight. I don't have morning sickness. I have all day and all night sickness. I've been throwing up for weeks straight and see no end in sight. I sleep fitfully and I ache for rest all day long. My energy has vaporized hours before I see your sweet brother at night, and I resent the washed out mother I've become. And yet, now it is nighttime, and my tired body longs for repose that my mind will not offer. So instead, I will lie still and whisper you stories. This has become my new favorite ritual, curling into a fetal position with my hands over my belly, holding tight to the space we share, breaking my history into bite-sized morsels to feed you during the sleepless nights. Do you love it too? I think so. I believe that you are savoring this time too. My grandmother was born into a very wealthy family. Her family compound in Nanking, China, was large and stately, an imposing facade protecting a powerful family. As a child, she had servants and maids. She was the oldest child born to a rigid and uncompromising father and a mild mother. Early in life, my grandmother would share stories from her life when she was the same age as I. Each story was like a pearl. A story itself was unique and beautiful. Each story had a shimmering surface. Yet, even as a child, I understood that she did not dive too deeply into her mysterious past. Her tales went no further than the creamy, smooth surface. Each of her stories I loved, yet it was the stories about the marketplace that held my attention rapt. She was forbidden to go to the market. She was a child of privilege, and her family did not want her mingling with the poor and working classes. But her young mind craved excitement beyond embroidery. She wanted to know how the whole world operated, not just the world to which she was born. She would sneak away from the family estate and venture into the marketplace. There she watched people barter, gossip, buy, and sell. The people on the street were equal in her mind, free to speak their mind, curse at one another, and laugh without consequence. This was vastly different from the quiet life that was suffocating her. I was enamored with her bravery. I, who still held my mother's hand in the grocery store, found my grandma brave and intriguing. As I grew older, my grandmother's stories grew darker and grimmer. From her description of her father emerged a man incapable of change or persuasion. He was formidable and unaccustomed to resistance. His idea was the right idea, always. My grandmother was very smart and admitted to college. This was unusual in the late 30s in China. Not many families would pay for their girls to have a college education. My grandmother wanted to study medicine and become a doctor or a scientist. Her father forbade these choices. If she was to go to college, it would only be to become a nurse. Weeks of fighting ensued between these two determined people, and in the end, my grandmother became a nurse. As her youth passed, darkness slinked into her life in the form of Japanese soldiers. My grandmother lived through the rape of Nanking. Her family home was taken to be the headquarters for the Japanese army. To escape rape and murder, my grandmother and her family hid at the hospital where her father worked. Soldiers routinely checked the hospital. My grandmother described the rhythmic pounding of their boots as the Japanese invaded deeper into her life. With each soldier's step, she breathed more shallowly until nothing escaped from her small body, not a single breath. Often she would be hiding under hospital beds or in closets with her mother, sisters, and her infant brother. Each person was positioned tightly, with purpose. There was no room for error. One small mistake, one sneeze, one wisp of hair, and their cover blown, their lives demolished and cast aside. And each day they hid with the knowledge that the smallest and most vulnerable member of their family could be their demise. The smallest cry, whimper, or coo that slipped from her infant brother could, in fact, be their undoing. My grandmother lived with trepidation with her family until she found a way out. She met an American missionary and organized an escape with him. Without telling her family, not even one sister, she plotted to leave her homeland on the chance that she would escape to Thailand and eventually the United States of America. My grandmother slipped away into the night without leaving so much as a note and vanished. She never told me how she got to Thailand. I imagine many bribes occurred, and perhaps there was no point in telling me how she reached her purgatory. Needless to say, she arrived and then she waited. She waited each day for her passport to America. Walking down sunny paths littered with snakes, birds, humanity, she would check for her passport to the United States of America. Eventually, it came. She traveled by boat to Hawaii, a land and people foreign to her, married to a man she hardly knew, all in the hope to survive and pursue a life of her own. I would love to say that her struggles there ended, but the reality is that they merely changed. After a few short and yes, loving years together, my grandmother's American husband died. He died leaving her with their small child. Eventually, my grandmother left Honolulu and went to New England to live with her husband's parents and family. There, amongst the proud Yankees, is where she met a man from Shanghai. I must admit that I want to be brave like my grandma, but I fear the circumstances that would push me to that brink. So I guess for tonight, I will just revel in her bravery and promise you that I will always be brave for you and William. I don't know how brave I can be for me, but for you two, I am fearless and strong. All right, dear E, strong dreams. Mama. October 16th, 2012. Dear E, I suppose you are starting to wonder about who the rest of we is from my letters. We are Daddy, William, and me. If you've been listening to your brother as he talks to you, he calls him Jeff. Same guy. Daddy is William's father too, but since William began speaking, he has only ever called him by his first name, Jeff. I think this drives some people crazy, but Daddy doesn't mind, and his is the only opinion that counts in this situation. Remember, E, in life, not everyone will get a say in your life. No matter how many people have an opinion, you have to think about who really gets a vote in a particular situation. Sometimes that decision will only be yours. Embrace that power. I met Daddy at Michigan State University. We lived in the same residence hall, Phillips. When we met, it wasn't a big deal. One of the greatest aspects of going to Michigan State was the camaraderie of dorm life. Phillips in 1998 was perfect. Everything I had hoped college would be. It was diverse, vibrant, and full of opportunity. In the dorm, people left their doors open all of the time, and you could just walk in and start talking to someone. Two of my best friends in the first few years of college were Sulema and Courtney. Sulema and I were both short with dark hair, and the very first time we talked to Daddy, we told him we were twins from the Philippines. He believed us, and we thought it was hilarious to trick him. Within the first few weeks of college, many of the freshmen that lived on the first and second floor of Phillips would congregate in the lobby to study. In reality, we talked, read, did some math, talked, and finally ordered takeout food and had it delivered around midnight. Daddy would come and hang out with everybody, but only for a little while, and he always went up to his room by 11 p.m. At this point, I didn't know him very well, but I was convinced that he must be failing his classes. He never brought his books or homework with him when he came to the lobby. He would show up after dinner in gym shorts and a t-shirt, empty-handed, and would quietly slide into conversations. Later, I would find out that he was probably the smartest person in the room. Academically, his habits were perfection. He would do his homework before he came down to the lobby. He never skipped class, and he stayed awake throughout the whole lecture. He attended every lab and took the time to really think about the questions being raised in class. Daddy is maddeningly intelligent and well-read. He reads about all sides of issues. He's tremendously curious about the world and sees opportunities where others see obstacles. He is logical yet wise and compassionate. His thoughtful and conscientious habits were well intact as a freshman in college. Mine were developing. Daddy and I didn't go out on a date, just the two of us, until our sophomore year of college. I was working for my church, and the college church group was hosting a night of contra dancing. I was part of the group hosting the event, so I had to go. As I was getting ready to leave, I saw Jeff and asked him if he wanted to go with me to the dance. He said yes. After that, I think he might have regretted his decision when the rusty church van pulled up in front of the dorm to pick us up. I know he regretted his decision when we got out of the van and walked into the church and you could hear the banjos playing before opening the doors. I felt him instinctively pull back a little as if to leave. I smiled at him and told him to stay. It would be fun. The fact that he stayed changed both of our lives forever. We walked from the church's side door into the fellowship hall and were hit with a loud rush of banjo music. Quietly we sat and watched a few people dance for a while before slowly standing up to give it a try. Until that night when we danced together, I thought Daddy was pleasant. We didn't have any major common interests besides loving MSU. He was friendly, reserved, and somewhat in his own thoughts. I usually saw him in the cafeteria eating while reading the New York Times. He was friendly, but not my close friend. There hadn't been a wow moment between us. He was a nice guy. Then we danced. The music in the church fellowship hall was loud and made you want to move. We joined the lines of dancers, and when he pulled me close for one of the steps, it felt like magic. His touch felt like an explosion through my body, and I immediately knew that there was more to this quiet man than I had realized before. We danced throughout the entire event. We laughed, made mistakes, got twisted up and untangled again and again. That night, I realized that being with your daddy is easy and fun, and it feels like a comfortable place for my spirit. As you spend time with him, you can tell that he holds deep magic within himself. I felt that magic as his confident hands spun me around the room, while his dark brown eyes smiled mirthfully at me, encouraging my curiosity about him. After the dance, we kept spending time together, but it didn't feel rushed or dire. Our relationship came together over time. It felt like opening Christmas presents one at a time and enjoying each gift before moving on. We dated throughout the rest of college, and eventually we got married 5 years later. And what began as one magical dance has become years of intentionally building a strong and joyful life together. I want to live to be a very old woman holding hands with your very old daddy. I picture us sitting in the garden together, enjoying being in that space at that time together. No matter how many years we have together, there will never be enough. His is the hand I always want to hold. Love, Mama.